Father's Day is supposed to be a time when a man feels celebrated, when the years of sacrifice, the quiet nights spent worrying, the long days of working two jobs finally mean something. But on this past Father's Day, my son gave his father-in-law a $12,000 Rolex, and he gave me a $10 pair of socks. I'll never forget the sting of that moment. The living room was filled with laughter, the smell of grilled steak drifting in from the backyard, glasses clinking as everyone toasted to family. My son, Ethan, had just stood up in front of the whole group, his wife, her family, and me, holding a small velvet box. He looked so proud, his smile wide as he handed it to Richard Hayes, his father-in-law. "Richard," Ethan said, almost trembling with excitement, "you've been such an incredible role model to me since the wedding. I wanted to give you something to show my gratitude." The box clicked open, and there it was, a Rolex watch so polished it caught the light and seemed to pull every eye in the room toward it. Richard let out a low whistle, lifted the watch and slipped it onto his wrist. "Ethan," he said with a booming laugh, "this must have cost a fortune." "Worth every penny," Ethan replied. "You deserve it." Everyone clapped, some even gasped. Richard's wife leaned over and whispered, "That must be at least $12,000. Then Ethan turned to me. For a moment I thought maybe I'd misjudged him. Maybe there was another box, smaller but heavier. Maybe the Rolex was just the first act of a grand gesture, and mine was next. My heart actually lifted, hoping he had remembered all those years I worked the graveyard shift, all the nights I skipped dinner so he could eat. He handed me a paper gift bag, the kind you grab at the checkout counter. "Here you go, Dad," he said casually, as though passing me a receipt. I reached inside. A pair of socks, plain, navy blue, $10 at most, the kind you buy in a 3-pack at the drugstore. "Thanks, son," I managed, forcing a smile as my throat tightened. Richard chuckled, patting me on the back with mock sympathy. "Well, at least he thought of you." The room erupted in polite laughter. Ethan laughed too, awkwardly, not realizing, or maybe not caring, how deep the knife had gone. Inside, my heart cracked. I remembered the little boy who used to run to the window when I came home from work, waving like I was his hero. I remembered how he once told me, after I gave him my last $20 for a school trip, "Dad, one day I'll give you the life you deserve." But in that moment, standing there with socks in my hand while his father-in-law admired a $12,000 watch, I didn't feel like his father anymore. I felt like a guest in his life. A second choice, a shadow. I sat there through the rest of dinner, nodding, smiling, chewing food that turned to ash in my mouth. No one noticed, or maybe they noticed and chose not to say anything. Either way, the message was clear. In my son's eyes, Richard Hayes was the man who deserved honor, not me. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I drove home alone. The socks sat on the passenger seat beside me, still in their crinkled paper bag. The streetlights cast long shadows on the road, and for the first time in years, I felt truly invisible. But here's what no one in that room knew. That pair of socks was the moment everything changed. Because a week later, my phone rang 20 times in one day, my son's voice on the other end, desperate and panicked. "Dad, don't do this. Please, don't do this." And I told him the words I never thought I'd have to say, "It's too late to regret." Before I tell you what happened after that Father's Day, you need to understand who I am and why that pair of socks cut so deep. My name is David Carter. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, I've been nothing more than a working man. I'm not rich, not flashy, not someone who commands a room with money or status. I'm just a father who tried his best. When Ethan was 10, his mother, my wife Laura, passed away after a long battle with cancer. I remember standing at the graveside holding his tiny hand as he tried to hold back tears. He looked up at me and whispered, "It's just us now, Dad." And from that moment it was. Raising a boy alone wasn't easy. I took on double shifts at the factory. Some weeks I'd come home with grease under my fingernails and aching bones, but I'd still sit at the kitchen table with Ethan, going over his math homework, pretending I wasn't dead tired. We didn't have much, but I made sure he never felt poor. Birthdays were celebrated with hand-baked cakes. Christmas mornings always had a gift under the tree, even if it meant I skipped paying a bill until the next month. There were nights when I opened the fridge and found barely enough food for one meal. I'd tell Ethan I wasn't hungry, then watch him eat. He was too young to realize I was lying. I just couldn't let him see how hard it really was. And yet, despite the struggle, Ethan grew up strong, smart, and ambitious. He earned a scholarship, became the first in our family to graduate from college, and built a career in finance. I couldn't have been prouder. I remember sitting in the bleachers at his graduation, tears in my eyes as he walked across the stage. "Dad," he said that night over dinner, "I'll never forget what you gave up for me. One day, I'll pay it all back. I didn't need him to pay me back. I only wanted him to live well, to remember that I was there when no one else was. That was enough." But life has a way of shifting loyalties. When Ethan married Claire, I noticed the change immediately. She came from a well-off family, the kind who took vacations in Europe and owned beach houses in the Carolinas. Her father, Richard Hayes, was everything I wasn't. Polished, wealthy, always wearing expensive suits and speaking with the kind of confidence that only comes from never worrying about money. I wanted to get along with Richard. After all, our kids were married, and family is family. But he made it hard. He'd smile and shake my hand, but I could feel the judgment in his eyes. One evening at dinner, he leaned over and said, "David, I admire how you've managed with so little." It's inspiring. The way he said, "with so little," burned. Ethan, though, seemed to soak it all in. He admired Richard, looked up to him. He'd ask him for career advice, laugh at his jokes, and I couldn't blame him. Richard had the kind of life Ethan wanted. I understood, but every time I saw them together, a small part of me worried. Was my son slowly forgetting the man who raised him? That's the state I was in when Father's Day rolled around. I was excited to see him, still clinging to the hope that no matter how much money or influence Richard had, I was still his dad. I ironed my best shirt that morning, wrapped a small gift for him, a framed photo of us fishing when he was 12, and drove to his house with a smile on my face. I remember sitting in the driveway for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, telling myself, this is the day. He'll remember who stood by him all those years. He'll remind me that I'm still his father before I'm anything else. I walked in, greeted by the warmth of Claire's family, the smell of food, the clatter of dishes. Ethan came over, hugged me quickly, and then moved on to welcome Richard with a longer, warmer embrace. I pushed the feeling down. It was Father's Day. I didn't want to spoil it with jealousy or insecurity. I just wanted to celebrate with my son. What I didn't know was that by the end of that day, the little hope I carried into his house would be crushed under the weight of a Rolex and a pair of socks. The living room buzzed with energy that Father's Day afternoon. Claire's family filled the couches and chairs, glasses of wine in hand, trading stories and laughter. Richard Hayes, as always, sat like a king at the head of the gathering, his voice carrying over everyone else's. I took a seat at the edge of the room, not wanting to draw attention. I was just glad to be included, though I couldn't help but notice how much bigger the house was than anything I'd ever owned. When Ethan cleared his throat and stood up, the chatter died down. He held a small velvet box in his hand, and I felt a swell of pride. This is it, I thought. He's about to show everyone that he still remembers me. But Ethan turned to Richard first. "Richard," he said, smiling nervously but with admiration in his eyes, "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for me these past couple of years. You've been such an incredible role model, both in business and in life." My stomach tightened. Ethan opened the box and the crowd gasped. A Rolex watch gleamed under the warm glow of the chandelier. Its polished surface caught the light and seemed to blind me for a moment. Richard's jaw dropped. "Ethan, this must have cost a fortune." "Worth every penny," Ethan replied, slipping the watch onto Richard's wrist. "You deserve it." The room erupted in applause. Claire kissed Ethan on the cheek, her eyes shining with pride. Richard lifted his arm to show off the watch, beaming as though he'd just been knighted. And then Ethan turned to me. For a split second, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe there was another gift, another gesture. Maybe this was just the opening act and my moment was coming. "Here you go, Dad," Ethan said casually, handing me a small paper bag. I reached inside. A pair of plain navy blue socks, thin, cheap, folded neatly, but utterly ordinary. My mouth went dry. "Thanks, son," I forced out, my voice thin and trembling. Richard let out a low chuckle, patting me on the back. "Well, at least he thought of you." Laughter rippled through the room. Ethan joined in, awkward and unaware, his eyes darting back to Richard as though needing his approval. I sat frozen, the socks clutched in my hands. My ears rang. Every smile, every laugh in that room blurred into a haze of humiliation. Inside, I was screaming. "Do you not remember, Ethan? Do you not remember the nights I skipped meals so you could eat? Do you not remember how I worked myself half to death just to pay your tuition? Do you not remember who carried you on his shoulders when you were too tired to walk?" But on the outside, I smiled. Because that's what fathers do. We swallow our pain so our children don't see it. The rest of the evening dragged on like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Richard kept admiring his Rolex, turning his wrist back and forth, basking in the compliments. Claire's mother leaned in close to me and whispered, "Isn't it wonderful how successful Ethan has become? He really takes after Richard." I nodded politely, but inside, the words stung worse than the socks. "Takes after Richard. Number. He takes after me." Every ounce of his determination, every bit of grit that carried him to success, came from the man sitting in the corner with a $10 gift bag in his lap. As dessert was served, Ethan leaned over to me. "Dad, hope you like the socks. You always need those, right?" He laughed lightly, as if it were all a joke. I forced a smile and said, "Of course, son." Practical gift, thank you. But my heart was breaking. The night ended with hugs and goodbyes. Richard shook my hand firmly, his new watch gleaming under the porch light. "Great seeing you, David. You raised a fine young man." His tone was patronizing, as if I were a bystander in my own son's story. I drove home in silence. The socks sat on the passenger seat, the bag crinkling every time the car hit a bump. I couldn't bring myself to touch them. I parked in my driveway and just sat, there, staring at my empty house. The quiet pressed in around me, and that's when the anger started to seep through the cracks in my heart. Not the loud, violent kind of anger, but the cold, heavy kind that settles deep and refuses to leave. It wasn't about the money, it wasn't about the Rolex, it was about respect, about love, about the recognition I had earned and never asked for, the kind every father deserves. That night, sitting in the dark, I realized something had shifted. My son had shown me where I stood in his life, and the truth hurt more than I thought it could. But I also realized something else. I wasn't going to let it end there. That night, after the Father's Day dinner, I didn't go straight into the house when I pulled into my driveway. Instead, I sat there in the car with the keys still in the ignition, staring at the crumpled gift bag on the passenger seat. The socks were inside, untouched, like a reminder of my place in Ethan's new world. For years, I had told myself I didn't need recognition, that being a father was about sacrifice, about giving without expecting anything in return. But sitting there in the dark, my chest tight, I realized it wasn't about needing a watch or some expensive gesture. It was about respect. It was about love. And that day, Ethan had shown me that the man he looked up to now wasn't the one who raised him. It was the man with the Rolex on his wrist. I carried the bag inside, dropped it on the kitchen counter, and collapsed into the old recliner in my living room. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My wife's picture sat on the mantel, her gentle smile frozen in time. I found myself speaking to her as though she were still there. "Laura," I whispered, "did we do something wrong? Did I fail him somehow? After everything, is this what it comes down to?" No answer came, of course, just silence. But somewhere in that silence, my resolve hardened. I got up, went to my desk, and pulled out the battered file folder that held my life's paperwork, bank accounts, savings bonds, my modest retirement plan, and the will I'd drafted years ago. For decades, I'd lived frugally. I never had much, but I made sure to tuck something away for Ethan's future. I wanted him to be secure, even after I was gone. That was what a father did. But as I sat there flipping through the papers, a thought struck me so sharply it made me pause. Why? Why should I leave everything to a son who saw me as an afterthought? A son who celebrated another man's influence and dismissed mine with a pair of socks? I set the papers down and stared at the wall for a long time. My chest ached with the weight of the decision forming inside me. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't about punishing Ethan. It was about dignity, about ensuring that whatever legacy I left behind went to someone who would value it. The next morning, I made some calls. First, to my lawyer, to schedule a meeting about revising my will. Then, to a local community foundation I'd read about years ago, one that helped underprivileged kids get scholarships, mentorship, and guidance. Kids who reminded me of Ethan when he was little, before money and status clouded his judgment. That week, I rewrote everything. Instead of leaving my estate to Ethan, I earmarked a significant portion for that foundation. I wanted to give kids who had nothing the same shot I gave my son, the shot that carried him to where he is now. When I signed the papers, I felt something inside me ease. Not joy, not triumph, just a quiet peace. It was the kind of decision you don't celebrate but also don't regret. Word got back to Ethan quicker than I expected. Maybe he overheard something from Claire. Maybe he saw a clue in my paperwork, or maybe it was just instinct. Either way, a week later, my phone started ringing. The first call came in the morning, then another an hour later. By noon, I'd missed 6 calls. By the evening, there were 20. Finally, I answered. "Dad?" Ethan's voice was frantic, almost trembling. "Please, don't do this. Don't change the will. Don't leave me out like that." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "Ethan, this isn't about the money." "Then what is it about?" he demanded. "Why are you doing this?" I let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. "It's about respect, son. It's about love. That Father's Day, you showed me who you honor. And it wasn't me. I can't leave everything I have to someone who values another man's role in his life more than his own father's." "Dad, no, you're misunderstanding. It was just a gift. I didn't mean you called him a role model. You gave him a $12,000 watch and you handed me socks like I was a guest at a white elephant party. Do you understand what that felt like? Do you understand what it said about where I stand in your life?" He stammered, searching for words. "Dad, please, I didn't mean it like that. Don't do this. I'll make it right." I held the phone tightly, my hand trembling. Part of me wanted to cave, to let him off the hook, to believe him. But the other part of me, the part that sat through decades of sacrifice, the part that swallowed humiliation that day in front of Richard Hayes, knew it was too late. "Ethan," I said, quietly but firmly, "it's too late to regret." And with that, I hung up. The day Ethan finally showed up at my house, I knew the conversation couldn't be avoided any longer. He had called me so many times that week I had stopped answering. My voicemail was full of his desperate pleas, his voice breaking each time. "Dad, please don't do this. I'll fix it. I'll make it right." When I opened the door, Ethan stood on the porch looking more like the boy I remembered than the man in the tailored suits he usually wore. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in. He just stepped past me into the living room. "Dad, we need to talk." I closed the door and followed him inside. He paced the floor like a trapped animal, running his hands through his hair. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice sharp with panic. "Did you really change your will? Did you really cut me out?" I sat down in my recliner, calm in the face of his storm. "Yes, Ethan." "It's true." He stopped pacing and stared at me, his mouth opening but no words coming out. For a moment he looked like the little boy who used to cling to my leg when he was scared. But then his face hardened. "Why? Why would you do that to me after everything we've been through?" I leaned forward, my hands clasped. "After everything we've been through is exactly why. Ethan, I gave my life to raising you. Every ounce of energy, every dollar I could spare, every sacrifice, I made it for you. And on Father's Day, you stood in front of me and told the whole world that the man you admire, the man you honor, isn't me. It's Richard Hayes." His shoulders slumped, guilt flashing across his face. "Dad, you're twisting it." "That wasn't what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" My voice cracked, the anger and hurt finally bubbling to the surface. "You gave him a $12,000 Rolex and gave me socks, Ethan. Socks. And then you called him your role model. Do you understand what that felt like? Do you understand what it said to me?" His lips trembled as he tried to answer, but I didn't give him the chance. "I don't need a Rolex," I said, my voice steadier now. "I don't need money or flashy gifts. But I do need respect. I do need to know that the years I spent breaking my back to give you a chance at life meant something. And that day you made me feel like none of it mattered." Tears filled his eyes. "Dad, I was stupid. I was trying to impress him, trying to show him I could measure up to his world. I wasn't thinking about how it looked to you. I swear, I didn't mean to hurt you." I sighed and sat back. For the first time, he looked honest, stripped of pride, but the wound was too deep to ignore. "That's the problem, Ethan. You weren't thinking about me at all." The room fell silent except for the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. Ethan's tears finally spilled over as he sank into the couch, his head in his hands. "So, what now?" he asked quietly. "You're just going to leave everything to strangers?" I shook my head. "Not strangers. Kids who need what you once needed, a chance. A hand to hold when the world feels too heavy. A reminder that someone believes in them. I gave you all of that, Ethan, but you showed me you don't value it anymore, so I'm giving it to someone who will." He lifted his head, his face streaked with tears. "But I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything?" My heart ached at those words, because of course he was, my son. Of course he meant everything. But love wasn't the issue anymore. It was about principle, about dignity. "You'll always be my son," I said softly, "and I'll always love you." But legacy isn't just about blood. It's about who deserves it, and right now, I need to make sure what I've built goes to those who will honor it. Ethan shook his head, sobbing quietly. For the first time in his life, he seemed small, vulnerable, broken. I wanted to reach out to hold him the way I did when he was a boy, but I stayed in my chair, the weight of my choice keeping me rooted. Finally, he whispered, "Dad, please, don't do this." "Give me another chance." I closed my eyes, the pain heavy in my chest. Then I opened them and looked directly into his. "It's too late to regret." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Ethan lowered his head, defeated, as the truth sank in. And in that moment the power shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't the invisible father in the corner. I was the man making the choice, the man setting the terms. That was the climax of it all. Not anger, not revenge, but the quiet reclaiming of my worth. After Ethan left that night, my house fell silent again. I sat in my recliner, staring at the front door long after it had closed. Part of me expected him to turn back, to knock and walk in, to say he understood. But the knock never came. The quiet gave me time to think. I replayed every moment of Father's Day in my mind. The clinking glasses, Richard's smug smile, Ethan's nervous laugh as he handed me those socks. It still hurt, but now, after facing him, the hurt felt different. It wasn't raw anymore. It was settled, like a scar forming where a wound once bled. The next morning, I drove downtown to the Foundation's office. The building wasn't fancy, just a converted brick warehouse with peeling paint. But inside, I met people who reminded me why I had made my choice. A group of high school students sat in the lobby with notebooks in their laps, waiting for a mentorship workshop. Their eyes were filled with the same hunger I used to see in Ethan's when he was young. The hunger to make something of themselves, to rise above their circumstances. When I signed the final documents transferring my estate to the Foundation, the director shook my hand and said, "Mr. Carter, you're going to change lives. These kids don't have anyone. What you've done here, it's going to mean the world." I walked out of that office lighter than I'd felt in years. For once, I wasn't just surviving, I was choosing. Choosing how my story would be remembered, who would carry it forward, and what it would stand for. But the aftermath wasn't without pain. Ethan stopped calling for a while. Weeks turned into months with only silence between us. I thought about him every day, about the boy who used to sit on my shoulders at the county fair, the young man who promised me he'd pay me, back one day. And though I was firm in my decision, I grieved the distance it had created. Then, one Sunday afternoon, months later, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there was Ethan standing there with his wife, Claire. His eyes looked softer this time, less frantic, more humbled. "Dad," he said quietly, "can we come in?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I once helped him with his homework. Ethan looked down at his hands before speaking. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "I was angry at first, hurt. But I realize now it wasn't about the money. It was about me not honoring you the way I should have. I was so focused on impressing Richard that I forgot the man who sacrificed everything to get me here." I listened, my chest tightening, not trusting myself to speak yet. "I can't change what I did," he continued, "but I want to do better. Not because I'm afraid of losing your inheritance, but because I don't want to lose you." For the first time in months, I smiled, a small, weary smile, but genuine. "Ethan," I said, "I don't need money from you. I don't need watches or anything expensive. I just need to know you see me, that you respect the years I gave you." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I do, Dad. I do now. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. That day, we didn't solve everything. Trust takes time to rebuild. But for the first time since Father's Day, I felt like maybe we had a chance. To this day, I don't regret the choice I made. The Foundation is thriving, and I visit often, meeting kids who remind me so much of Ethan when he was little. They call me Mr. Carter, but sometimes one or two slip up and call me Dad. And every time I hear that word, it fills something inside me that had been empty for far too long. The lesson I want to leave you with is this. Fathers don't need expensive gifts. They don't need grand gestures. What they need, what we need, is recognition, respect, and love. A father wants to know that his sacrifices mattered, that his child still sees him as the man who stood in the trenches for them. So, if you're watching this, and you have a father who gave you everything he could, don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until the phone calls go unanswered or the papers are signed. Show him now. Show him today. Because socks wear thin, watches lose their shine, but the love and respect you give your father, that's what lasts. And that, right there, is the real inheritance. And that's my story. A story about love, sacrifice, respect, and what it really means to be a father. If you've ever felt overlooked, or if you've learned something from your own father that shaped who you are today, I'd love to hear it. Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and I know others will connect with your words too. If this video spoke to you, if it made you think, About your own family, do me a favor, hit the like button, share it with someone who might need to hear this lesson today, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Stories that dig deep, that make us feel, and that remind us what really matters. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect and love are the greatest gifts you can give.